Decoy setups seem to be something that a lot of turkey hunters overlook. Despite what you might think, there's actually a science to how you set up your decoys. And there are some things you can consider to determine which ones you put out and where you put them. I've seen plenty of hunts go south because the decoy setup just isn't quite right, and those toms get hung up and keep their distance. So in this video, we're going to go over 3 turkey decoy setup tips so you can get those toms to fully commit and fill those tags. And the first turkey decoy setup tip is to make sure that your setups are realistic. This doesn't just mean that you need to set up your decoys in a realistic scenario, but that your decoys themselves need to be as realistic as possible. In recent years, decoys have become more and more realistic, so this really shouldn't be a problem. But I do recommend that you stay away from some of the the really cheap soft foam decoys. They're usually in a package folded up, and whenever you break them out, they just don't hold their shape. At least the ones that I've tried. Your decoys need to have natural posture. They need to be in a natural pose. So if your decoy doesn't hold its shape, and even some of the rubber ones, I don't know if it's just the way they're packaged, one side's always pushed in, you got to keep popping it back out, and if they don't hold their shape, they're not going to look real. You also need to make sure that your decoy is the proper height off the ground. It may seem like an overkill detail, but turkeys spend all their time around turkeys. They know what a normal turkey looks like. So if your turkey is staked in a way that makes it look like it's 3 times taller than a normal turkey, or if it looks like it got chopped off at the knees, they're gonna know something's up. So make sure that you keep your decoys about a foot off the ground to give it a more, the most natural pose. Make sure they also staked straight up, not leaning to one side or the other or forward or backwards. Turkeys don't stand like that. Their legs keep them upright. And if you have multiple decoys out, which in the early season you definitely should have more than one out there, make sure they are all facing in the same general direction. Turkeys tend to move together the same direction. So if you have your decoys set up that way, you will pull in a lot more toms than some incoherent mess of decoys. And the second decoy setup tip is to make sure that you have your decoys set up the right distance from you. A lot of turkey hunters will put their decoys out as far away from them as they can and still have an effective shot. And while that thought process isn't completely wrong, it does limit them to only being able to shoot toms that fully commit. If you are bow hunting, set up your decoys about 10 yards away from you. And if you're using your shotgun, make it about 20. And don't set them up directly out in front of you. Put them off to one side. This will help ensure that you get a high percentage shot even with toms that don't fully commit. And you should also know your effective range. I know some of the newer ammo options out there, and with some of the high quality chokes, can push your range out a lot further, but you should know your limits. Just because that round can reach out there doesn't mean you should take that shot. And the third turkey decoy setup tip is to know what part of the season you're hunting. What I mean by this is in the early part of the season, a competitive decoy setup will probably work best. That's a quarter or half strut jake with a receptive hen will get a lot of interest. If you put just a single hen decoy out there, you may not get very much interest at all. This setup will probably be your best bet for the first few weeks of the season until it just doesn't work. You may notice that as the weeks go on, those toms get hung up or even shy away from your decoy setups. And when that happens, it's time to switch to an all-hen setup. The point is to pay attention to how toms are reacting to your setups and then adjust accordingly. If you notice that toms are shying away from you or getting hung up all the time and you've got a jake and a hen out there, get rid of that jake and throw out a few more hens. So that was 3 turkey decoy setup tips. If you have any more tips, make sure you leave those down in the comments below. Hit that like button if you like this video, share it if you found it helpful, and make sure that you are subscribed so you can stay informed.